He served coffee to explorers who traveled the world. They never imagined their waiter had already mapped it all in his mind. One sketch changed everything. What happened next left everyone speechless. The steam rising from Marcus Lee's coffee pot carried the scent of burnt chicory and unfulfilled dreams. Another late shift at Rousseau's Tavern in the French Quarter. Another parade of tourists who looked through him like he was part of the furniture. The worn floorboards creaked under his size 11 sneakers as he balanced 3 plates of jambalaya on his forearm, navigating between tables packed with weekend adventurers, swapping stories about places he'd only seen in the dog-eared atlases he collected from garage sales. "Excuse me," called a woman in an expensive safari jacket, barely glancing up from her phone. "Could you bring us more bread? And maybe wipe this table down properly this time." Her companion, a weathered man with calloused hands and eyes that held too many sunsets, winced slightly at her tone but said nothing. Marcus nodded, swallowed the familiar burn of invisible humiliation, and disappeared back toward the kitchen. He'd been clearing tables for 3 years now, ever since his grandmother's medical bills had eaten through his college fund. The other servers joked that Marcus was part ghost. He could slip through the dining room without disturbing a conversation, refill water glasses without being noticed, and somehow remember every order without writing anything down. They thought it was a useful trick. They had no idea it was everything. The tavern's walls were covered with faded maps and expedition photos donated by customers over the decades. Marcus knew every latitude line, every river bend, every mountain range by heart. During slow afternoons, he'd trace trade routes with his finger while polishing wine glasses, memorizing the geography that had shaped civilizations. His grandmother used to say he had a remembering mind, the same gift that had made his great-grandfather legendary among the river pilots who navigated the treacherous Mississippi channels before GPS existed. "Boy, you dreaming again?" Chef Maurice's voice cut through Marcus's reverie. "Table 12 wants their check, and that explorer fellow is looking for you specifically." Marcus straightened his apron and walked back into the dining room's amber glow. The safari woman had stepped outside to take a call, leaving her companion alone with what looked like a ruined notebook. Water had soaked through half the pages, turning careful ink lines into abstract smears. "I'm so sorry about this," the man said as Marcus approached. His voice carried the weight of genuine disappointment. "We were caught in that storm yesterday, and our research maps are completely destroyed. 3 months of work in the Amazon basin, and I can't even tell which river feeds into which anymore." He looked up at Marcus with tired blue eyes. "I don't suppose you know anything about South American geography." Marcus glanced at the destroyed notebook. Through the water damage, he could make out fragments of a river system that looked familiar. Too familiar. His pulse quickened. "Which tributary were you mapping?" Marcus asked quietly. The man looked surprised to be engaged in actual conversation by his waiter. "The Ucayali system, near Pucallpa. We were tracking how the seasonal flooding affects indigenous trade routes, but without these reference maps." He shrugged helplessly. "May I?" Marcus gestured toward the notebook. The man nodded, curiosity replacing exhaustion in his expression. Marcus studied the water-damaged pages for 30 seconds, his eyes moving with the precision of a scanner. Then he walked to the bar, grabbed a napkin, and began to sketch. His hand moved without hesitation, laying down river curves and tributary junctions with the confidence of someone who had walked those banks personally. "The main channel shifts about 3 kilometers east during high water season," Marcus said softly, adding detail to his impromptu map. "The trading posts here and here get cut off completely, so the local communities develop these alternate routes through the Oxbow Lakes." His pen traced hidden pathways that existed only in the memories of people who had never seen a satellite image. The explorer's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. He stared at the napkin, then at Marcus, then back at the napkin. The crude drawing matched his ruined maps with impossible accuracy. Not just the major geographic features, but the seasonal variations, the cultural significance, details that had taken his team months of fieldwork to document. "How do you know this?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He'd overstepped, revealed too much. I read a lot. Geography magazines, explorer journals. My great-grandfather was a river pilot, so I guess I inherited an interest in waterways." "You read a lot." The man repeated the words like he was testing their weight. "Son, what's your name?" "Marcus Lee, sir." "Marcus, I'm Dr. Jackson Wells. I've spent the last 15 years leading expeditions for the National Geographic Society, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that what you just drew from memory doesn't exist in any magazine or journal. This level of detail. You'd have to have been there. The tavern's ambient noise seemed to fade into background static. Marcus felt exposed, vulnerable, like that moment in middle school when he'd correctly answered a question about African trade routes and earned a week of taunts about trying to act smart. "I've never left Louisiana," Marcus said simply. "Doctor." Wells closed his notebook and leaned forward. "Would you mind sitting down? I think we need to talk." Marcus glanced around the dining room. His shift wouldn't end for 2 hours, and Maurice would dock his pay if he caught him socializing with customers. But something in the older man's voice suggested this conversation might be important. "Just for a minute," Marcus said, sliding into the empty chair. "How many maps have you memorized?" "I don't know. I don't really count them. I see something once and it just stays." Dr. Wells pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a satellite image of an unfamiliar coastline. "What about this?" Marcus studied the screen for a few seconds. "Looks like the western coast of Madagascar, maybe around Mahajanga. Those barrier islands form natural harbors that the Sakalava people have used for centuries." He paused. Though this image must be at least 5 years old, there should be more erosion around the northern headland by now. The phone nearly slipped from Dr. Wells's fingers. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Have you ever considered that this gift of yours might be meant for something bigger than—" He gestured around the tavern. "This?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd considered it every single day for the past 3 years, usually in the quiet hours before dawn when his dreams were still full of places he'd never see. Thinking about it doesn't pay Grandmama's prescriptions. What if it could? Before Marcus could respond, the safari woman returned, bringing with her a cloud of expensive perfume and barely contained irritation. "Jackson, we need to go. I've already called our backup guide, and he can meet us tomorrow morning to discuss replacement maps." She finally acknowledged Marcus with a dismissive glance. "Could we get our check, please?" Dr. Wells didn't move. "Caroline, I think we may have found something more valuable than replacement maps." "What are you talking about?" Dr. Wells turned the napkin so Caroline could see Marcus's sketch. Her expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to something approaching awe. "Where did this come from?" "Our waiter drew it, from memory, in about 3 minutes." Caroline looked at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. That's not possible. These details aren't in any published materials." "I know, but he's just a—" She stopped herself, but not quickly enough. The unfinished sentence hung in the air like smoke from a doused fire. Marcus stood up, the familiar weight of diminished expectations settling on his shoulders like an old, unwelcome coat. "I'll get your check." "Wait." Dr. Wells caught his arm gently. "Marcus, I'm leading an expedition to Guatemala next month. We're mapping Mayan trade routes that haven't been documented since the colonial period. It's dangerous work and the pay isn't glamorous, but—" He paused. "I think you might be exactly what we need." Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. "You want me to come with you?" "I want you to help us find things that have been lost for centuries." Caroline started to protest, but Dr. Wells raised a hand to stop her. "Caroline, in our business, accuracy means the difference between discovery and disaster. This young man just reproduced months of our work in 3 minutes. What do you think that's worth?" Marcus thought about his grandmother's face when he told her he was dropping out of school. He thought about the dreams he'd filed away in the same drawer as his acceptance letters to LSU. He thought about the weight of other people's low expectations and his own buried hopes. "When do we leave?" 3 weeks later, Marcus stood on the deck of a research vessel cutting through the choppy waters of the Gulf of Mexico, bound for Guatemala. His grandmother had cried when he told her, but they were tears of pride, not fear. The money Dr. Wells had advanced him would cover her medications for 6 months, and the experience might change everything. In his cabin, Marcus opened the leather journal Dr. Wells had given him as a welcome gift. The first page was blank, waiting for new discoveries, new memories to be preserved in the careful lines of someone who understood that maps weren't just drawings, they were doorways. As the ship pushed through the darkness toward Central America, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the electric anticipation of possibility. For the first time since he was a child tracing his finger along the Mississippi's curves in his great-grandfather's river charts, Marcus Lee was exactly where he belonged. The ocean whispered against the hull, and in that rhythm, Marcus heard the promise of undiscovered territories, ancient secrets, and maps that existed only in the space between memory and mystery. Tomorrow, he would help chart the unknown. Tonight, he was already home. Remember this, brilliance doesn't announce itself with credentials or pedigree. Sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come wrapped in the most ordinary circumstances, waiting for someone wise enough to recognize that talent has no uniform, no prescribed background, no expected face. Look closer. Listen deeper. The next Marcus Lee might be serving your coffee, filing your papers, or cleaning your office, carrying entire worlds in their mind, waiting for someone to ask the right question.